Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Storytime, Episode 4. And in this video, I am going to get into some very, very touchy subjects. So, trigger warning up ahead for those of you that are highly sensitive to self harm, addiction, and bad thoughts. I have left a phone number on the bottom of this video entirely. And this phone number is for you to call if you ever have any bad thoughts about self-harm or ending it all, because at the end of the day, we all need some help sometimes, and it's nothing wrong to ask for help. It's nothing wrong at all, and I highly encourage it for anyone who needs it. Not all of us are as strong as others that they can just drop it in a heartbeat. So, if you need any help, if you know anybody that needs any help, please feel free to call that number. It's the suicide hotline phone number, and it will absolutely save a life, or if not a life, your life, because everyone's lives matter at the end of the day. But yeah, let's begin with this story time, shall we? Jesus. Let's begin back to when I was just a little kid. I was the age of 4 years old. My father passed away in a terrible, terrible accident on the freeway. He got ripped apart into 3 different pieces by a diesel truck. That shit tore him apart, limb from limb, basically, and split him into 3 pieces all over the freeway. Horrible accident, horrible way to go, but it is what it is, right? It's everyone's destiny. Nothing in life is ever guaranteed but your own death. That is the one thing that we have to know about life. Life, you don't take any of the materialistic things that you obtain in this lifetime. You don't even take your phone, you don't take your money, you don't take anything. You just have your own soul. And this life is only temporary. And we have to make the best of what we have with it. Now, he passed away at the age when I was only 4 years old, and that's kind of what rooted this entire depression arc for me, because when I was little, I would always see these kids with their parents, both of their parents, picking them up, and it was the most happiest thing that I could possibly see in a child's face when their parents would pick them up from school, when there would be parent-teacher events where the kids would show off everything that they made in class or what it was, or whatever it was in that form, and these festivals that they would have. And meanwhile, I was there either with my mom, or if my mom was too busy most of the time because she was out there working. She was one of the hardest working mothers out there in the world. I have to give my mom praise for all the work that she's done in her life and the way she tried her hardest to attempt to raise me, even though I was raised mostly by my grandmother. So that's kind of what rooted my sadness at the end of the day. I didn't notice it back then when I was a kid, and I didn't notice it and I didn't accept it until I was much, much older, probably around the age of 17, 19. Around that range is when I accepted that fact that I was clearly depressed from all that subconscious sadness, I guess you could say. And it rooted me into a dark path of drugs, of just mayhem and self-destruction that no child, no human being should ever go through. But guess what? I went through it, and a lot of other kids are going through it right now as I speak. So, at the age of 12, I started with crystal methamphetamine, and I went on to other drugs from there, marijuana and whatnot, and it just got worse and worse. And I started going down a rabbit hole. I started a life of many crimes, and it wasn't the best as a juvenile. So this kind of started to become a bad habit, a bad obsession, and thus my first mental hospital trip came to be. And it was at the age of 14 to 15. I was in the living room, if I recall correctly. I was in the living room, and prior to this I had already been cutting. I'd been cutting my arm, my left arm to be exact, where my bicep is. and my legs. And it was a horrendous thing for me to go through. I do not advocate for it. I do not advise anybody to go with it. And if you know anyone doing it, please get them help. Even if they say they don't want to get in trouble, they're never going to get in trouble for it. They need help. And they need help badly. Because at the end of the day, they could go to extreme measures the way I did. And we're going to get to the escalation as to what happened at the end of all this. And how I managed to fight my demons off. So, I was with a knife, ready to go, ready to put it through my heart, or attempt to put it through my heart. And I can't remember what happened exactly because I was so drugged up. But I do remember being in the back of a cop car, just absolutely hating the world. I was in handcuffs. I was being transported to a mental hospital, and everything was looking dark and gloomy for me. And I was ready to attack these officers as soon as I got out of the handcuffs. Unfortunately for me, I was much smaller in stature and extremely outnumbered. As soon as I got out of the squad car, they took me to a hospital. It was like a facility. It wasn't exactly a hospital, but it was a facility. They called it a mental hospital, mental institution. I remember walking down this dark, it was nighttime. I'm not sure if it was raining or not. In my memory, it looked like it was raining, but I'm not sure. I can't confirm or deny that. But I remember walking down this eerie looking walkway past 3 security gates, multiple people keeping eyes on me. I felt as though I was a prisoner in maximum security prison, just getting transported from one end to the other. And from there, they took me to this room where they tried to question me. I stayed completely silent the entire time. They undid the handcuffs, and I saw so many people in there. There was around 6 to 7 people inside that room with me, trying to figure out what exactly was wrong with me, where I was mentally. They stripped me from my shoelaces to my belt to anything that could possibly hurt me or hurt others. Afterwards, 2 nurses escorted me to a room where they had an empty bed for me, and they told me, "There's your bed. Go ahead, have a good night. We'll talk more in the morning," even though I hadn't spoken a word. First night there, it was alright. I kind of just laid there staring at the wall with an empty stare and the most extreme hatred in my heart for everything that had just happened, because I had failed. I hadn't successfully done what I wanted to do. Afterwards, I remember waking up in the morning. They woke me up. They were like, "It's breakfast time." I went out to the main little area where they were watching TV. They had these little breakfast trays. I wasn't hungry. I didn't want to eat. I was coming down from my high. And it was honestly one of the most horrible fucking mornings I ever had in my life. Afterwards, around afternoon time, they took me and they took all the kids into this room where they had therapy time. And they had the boys and the girls separated, by the way. So I was in the boys section. But when we went into that room, we were all united, boys and girls. As I sat down in my chair, I sat down crisscross applesauce. And I remember looking across at an empty chair. And for some reason, as I'm staring at that empty chair, the door to my right swings open. And I see this very nerdy, very adorable looking girl, and my eyes just bestowed upon her like crazy. My eyes were glistening just at the sight of her. She was with messy hair. She looked like she had gone through the worst experience of her own life. She was a very beautiful soul from what I could tell. But at the time, I was going through so much in my head to even focus on her that much, but enough for me to realize that I was very, very much attracted to her. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties on the moment with my mic. But yeah, I was very much attracted to her. And I realized that as soon as I was just staring at her endlessly, and then everyone was going around the room saying how they got there, what their story was, and what had happened. Um, when it got to me, I kind of refused to talk, and they kind of got me to start talking. And I remember just talking just a little bit about my incident that happened the night prior and how I was feeling. And I just said, I'm just feeling numb, just feeling empty. And then I immediately just, as I was talking about it, I was just looking down to the ground. And then I just looked up and I see the girl just staring. I ended my little story time with them at that very moment, and I remember hearing everyone else out, and then it came to her, and it was one of the most beautiful little moments ever, because I heard the tragic story of her. She had actually gone into the bathroom at her house, and she tried to overdose on a bunch of random pills. Luckily, her family was there in time and they got her to a hospital. That explains the hospital gown. And I guess, they took care of her there. And she was just being very open about everything. Kind of opened my eyes a little bit to how depression was for the first time ever. And that's kind of a good thing, Anyways, I'll explain why the girl was important at the end. Afterwards, we went back. After the little therapy session, we went back to our separate places where the boys and girls were separated once again. Started watching Courage the Cowardly Dog. And I just sat there in that chair just thinking, what am I going to do next? When I get out of here, am I going to end it all? Am I going to continue with this darkness? Or am I going to try to fight it? Do I really deserve to live? I kept asking myself these questions left and right. As young as I was, as drug addicted as I was, there was a part of me that was still fighting to stay alive. And afterwards, we went into this arts and crafts room. It was separate from the place, so they opened up the door, then they opened up the security gate, and then there was another security gate to a different section of the place. And I remember we were doing arts and crafts and stuff like that. I met other kids there I started talking to the other kids, started learning from them. I started to study them in a way, trying to see what makes them all tick and what I have in common with these people and why I'm there and why they're there. As I learned and I learned more, I realized that maybe life isn't that bad. Maybe if you keep fighting, you'll be able to survive properly. And little by little, as the days went by, I started feeling better. I had a visitation from my mother. She brought me my phone. And I remember just listening to this one song by a very small YouTuber, well, at the time, small YouTuber, named Brysi, Brysi. It was a Battlefield 4 song. I was into video game music back then. Very cringy stuff, I know. I remember listening to that song, and it was just like a healing moment for me. And then on the second to last day, there at that hospital stay, I felt so much stronger, so much better. But the nights prior, I was living in a nightmare at night because I was going through withdrawals like crazy. I just wanted a fix. I just wanted one line. I just wanted one bump. I just wanted one hit. I just wanted something to take the edge off. I was going through some bad withdrawals. Almost as if I just came back from running a marathon. And it was absolutely the most horrendous nights of my life. As I proceeded to get better throughout the nights, I started getting stronger. I started clearing my head out, and I I was I was healing. For the first time in my life, I was actually healing from the past trauma that I didn't even know I had. And I remember the second to last day out there, we ended up going to this activity room where there was a basketball court and there was all this different stuff to do, activities to do, and all the kids were there having fun. And I don't remember who asked who to play, but I remember I saw the girl again. This time she was wearing clothing, regular clothes. I'm guessing her parents brought her clothing. Her parents would always visit her every day. I noticed that. I literally was eyes on her like crazy. I was having a really big crush on this girl. And I remember just playing a game of basketball with her. And it's funny because I still remember the score. The score was 6-7. Me winning, of course. It's Nitro. Come on. Can't let them win, right? And I remember the score, but the one particular part I remember was when she tripped. She fell. She fell on her butt. She slid. She tripped and slipped. Her legs went up into the air and she fell on her butt. And immediately my first instinct was to catch her. And I caught her as she was falling, but not quite in time. So she kind of fell on her butt as I'm lifting her back up. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" She said, "Yeah, I'm very much okay now." And I just remember just looking into her eyes and she was looking into mine. And then I look in the corner and I see one of the nurses just smiling. Nurses or caretakers or whatever they were, I don't understand. I still don't understand who was who at that point. And that was my first real authentic crush that I had on somebody. Crush, not love, not that strong of an emotion, because I never actually connected with this girl to that strong point yet. Well, at all. I remember I had something planned where I was going to want to communicate with her outside of the place. I wrote this cute little letter to her and a little poem. Yes, I was very poetic back then. Jesus. Cringy, right? Nitro, the asshole of all assholes. A poetic fucking genius at the time. And I remember that this letter that I had written, I was ready to give it to her on the last day there. And unfortunately, she had left early. Literally an hour early from what I was expecting. I tore the letter up, put it into pieces, flushed it down the toilet. And I told myself, this is a lesson. Even as a little kid, I told myself this is a lesson for me to grow. Now, I don't know if I can release the name of the girl or not, but fuck it. It could be anybody, right? Her name was... Nah, never mind. I'm not going to release that information. But anyways, I will say that the hospital was in Alhambra, in California. That I can say. And the day I got out, maybe 2 weeks after, I got into one of my first serious relationships ever. When I got out, I was a different person. But then the depression hit me again. Like a rock in a fucking hard place. It just hit me. It hit me so hard. And, well, then we go into the second mental hospital trip. Now, as for the second hospital trip, it was horrendous because I just remember that it was connected to a crime I had committed. I had tried to burn down the apartment that I was living in because I had moved in with my mother and my stepfather at the time. And I remember I was lighting up boxes, trying to set the whole place on fire. Unsuccessfully, of course, thankfully. And I was trying to burn with it all, because I was going through so much darkness. I couldn't bear the darkness anymore. And I just remember that the police came, and I wanted to suffer in my death. I was very self-hating, very self-loathing. I had so much going in my head where the urge to cut, the urge to feel pain was at its highest peak. And the drug abuse had just gotten out of control to the point where I was doing psychedelics almost daily, dropping acid, doing Xanax, ecstasy, cocaine, crystal methamphetamine, and a bunch of fucking weed. And this was just breathtaking as to how much power that these drugs had over me. I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. I was very much a very weak person back then. And back then, as a child, I couldn't fathom the amount of power that these drugs had over my life, and how much I would have actually missed out on had I been successful. And yeah, I ended up going to a different hospital this time. It was a interesting hospital. There was a GameCube, there was a Nintendo Wii, there was a lot of these different things. And I was surprisingly still in the same goddamn relationship that I was in after the first one, after the first hospital trip. I remember just playing games there and having my fun while I was recovering again and trying to heal again. And I was fighting my demons left and right every single day. That hospital trip was not really memorable or anything exciting that happened there. But yeah, it was a good little trip. It was a good little vacation away from the suffering that I was going through at home. And as the time passed, I got out of there, recovered a little bit, and tried to stay away from any sharp objects for a good chunk of my life after that. And by good chunk of my life, I mean a couple months. But yeah, I went through this craziness. And then there was this suicide attempt that happened right before my third hospital trip. And this suicide attempt was the closest I ever got to my death. Had it not been for somebody, I was sleeping over at a friend's, not a friend's, but like a very close person's house. And I remember I had made a makeshift kind of noose in a way. I started to wrap it around my neck. I jumped off the fucking chair, kicked it off. I was very slim in stature during the time and very tiny. And I was choking out. Everything was going away. I couldn't breathe anymore properly. And I was suffering, and believe it or not, I was enjoying the sufferment that I was going through while hanging there. As I was listening to My Chemical Romance. I was listening to the Black Parade album. The song specifically that was going on was Mama by My Chemical Romance. And I just remember everything started to fade, and the door busted down. I couldn't hear anything, but I saw the door bust down. And there came one of my friends. And immediately he released me from it. I was so weak. I saw white around my vision. kind of like a tunnel. And I just remember laying there, and he's just hitting me in my fucking chest or doing some kind of compressions. And then slowly and slowly I started breathing again, and all he did was hold me. I didn't cry, I didn't weep, I just stayed quiet as I was having trouble to start to breathe. The responsible thing for him was to probably call the cops, but he didn't want to see me back in the hospital. He wanted me to fight this naturally, and I thank him for this every single day. Because that fight was one of my biggest fucking fights in the world. And I won. I spent days with him, with my people, and little by little I got another set of mindset to keep fighting again, and keep fighting my demons, and keep fighting myself. I got clean for a couple months when it came to the drugs, and I just remember seeing everything in a brighter perspective. But then, after maybe a year had passed, everything was falling apart again. And when I say everything was falling apart, I mean I was facing some serious charges as a child, and I was afraid, and I was genuinely scared. You know, as a kid, you look at these charges and you're like, wow, they're gonna try me as an adult for all these things. And it was just mind-boggling to me. I was about to try to attempt suicide, but I guess my letter that I had written down was told to somebody. I don't know who found it. I don't know how they found it. They weren't supposed to find it until after the act was committed, but they found it. And I remember going to the hospital one more time as a child, and I was crushed. I was in the hospital. They took me to this hospital, and I believe it was in Echo Park in California, and it was very hidden. It was like a hidden little valley hospital. That place was something else. I saw an old friend in there too that I haven't seen in a while. My girlfriend, who stuck with me during the time, still staying with me. She was still there for me. I was astonished as to how she put up with all my bullshit. And I want to actually take this chance to say thank you to her, wherever she is, however she is, if she ever even knows who Nitro is, who Nitro really is. Thank you so much. And you know who you are. You were there in the trunk, well, not even the trunk, the back seat of my mom's freaking Chevy Tahoe. You were in the back seat, hiding away from your parents because your parents didn't want us together during the time. And with good reason, of course, you know. Who would want their child to be with someone that was so drug addicted and so broken during the time? And such a bad influence for her. But she stayed pure. She stayed good. She was a very good Christian girl, and she remained that. Even though her father was a very vindictive person and a person that had a lot of hate towards me, I don't blame him. As a father myself, I don't blame him at all. I actually applaud him for trying his hardest to keep us away. But at the same time, he should have gone a different route and gotten to know me more. Anyways, that hospital trip was not really memorable either. But after my recovery, I was feeling loved because my mother was there, she was there, a lot of people were there, uniting with me, actually helping me out this time. And then the depression was able to be dominated by me. I fought my demons and I won again. But I didn't win the war. I just won that battle. Let's fast forward now. For those of you that watched episode 3, between the drama between me and my baby mama, the mother of my child, the breakup, put me through a wormhole of depression. Losing the actual love of my life, which, by the way, was separate from this girl that I had. So me and her broke up, and I ended up going with my baby mama, the mother of my child. And while I was in a different city, different county, I was about to start a family. I had plans. I had a bunch of plans. And everything went to shit. And I went back into the wormhole of drugs again. Now this time, the drugs really got the best of me. Right after the breakup, I remember leaving, and I remember getting back home and completely just railing line after line after line. And these lines were just consuming me like a fucking leech, like an infection that I couldn't get rid of. I was being drenched in sadness, in mental, into an unstable mentality. I was completely unstable, unhinged, and absolutely fucking broken. I remember I couldn't do it anymore, and I was just ready to die again. But the thought of my daughter, the thought of my little baby girl being out there in the world, pushed me, and it pushed me to fight for myself. And I ended up asking for the help. I ended up asking for help, and it turned into a complete and utter fight between my stepfather and me, my mother and me, and it broke us all apart. I don't remember much about that night when I went to the hospital. Well, what led up to me going to the hospital. But I do remember that it was bad. Really, really bad. I remember my brothers saw the worst of me. The worst that anyone could ever see of me. They saw it that day. They saw it that night. And they probably were scared of me, of who I was. And I would be too. Because that me is no longer who I am. That me is somebody that I have buried deep down inside. And I refuse to ever let him back out. Anyways, going to that hospital trip, I got kicked out because I was already 18. I had gotten kicked out of my house, relentlessly making me somewhat of a bastard homeless bitch, going through hell and back. But I remember being in that hospital bed, looking out the window, and just thinking of my daughter, thinking of her little chubby cheeks, thinking of her little giggles, her little smiles, the little farts that she would do whenever she would eat her Lucky Charms. Everything just became more of a fire, of a passion to keep going. And I started managing to control the drugs. The drugs and me were in sync after when I got out of that hospital trip. But funny little story, in that hospital trip, there was this old lady, because it was all adults there, but there was this old lady. I was sitting down at the table eating, and I remember this old lady looked at me. She's like, "I know who the fuck you are. You're a fucking monster." And I'm looking at her like, "What? What do you mean I'm a monster? What? Like, what do you know I've done? What have I done?" and I thought she knew that I thought she was like crazy or something, or like maybe she could see shit, and she saw that I had almost burned down my fucking apartment back when I was younger. And no, she said, you did 9/11. You live. She called me Osama bin Laden. And I'm like, God damn it, I'm too brown for this shit now. But yeah, she basically was screaming at me saying I was doing 9/11, and she was about to get up and attack me when the nurses actually got up and fucking grabbed her. I wasn't afraid of that or anything. I was ready to fucking throw down with the old bitch. I was like, okay, let's do this, Grandma. Let's go for it. Let's go for it. It's gonna be like fucking 1960 Rockies movie. Let's go. But yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, afterwards I completely went into a state of recovery, and that's when everything else started falling into place. You know, from me moving into my best friend's house to me seeing that girl that lied to me about her age, me getting arrested by the United States Marshals. Storytime episode 1 if you want to go back and rewatch that shit, because I ain't gonna repeat all that. And lo and behold, this is who I am today. But I just wanted to share this part of me because it's something that I needed to just get off my chest for a while now, because it's just been dwindling in my little brain recently, where it's like, where did this even come from? And what about other people that are suffering through this, you know? If this video could just reach out and help one person out, just one, I've accomplished my goal. If it helps at least one person through any darkness that you're going through, just know, even when your light fades away, there's still a chance for you to reignite the flame. Because at the end of the day, this life that we have, it's only temporary. And when we leave it, all we leave behind is our memory of who we were as a person, and of course, our legacies, which is our children. And for those of you that are unfortunately cursed to not have children, you could always adopt. But I digress. I want to cut to the chase, because I don't want to make this video a 50-minute long video. Let's cut it down to 40, shall we? If there's one thing to learn about all this, it's, if you know anybody that's going through drug abuse, if you know anybody that's going through this type of scenario where you don't even know what's wrong with them, and they seem like a completely different person as to who they are originally, reach a hand out. Help them out. Ask them if they need help. They may deny it, but trust me, they need it. And it could really help out. And if you yourself are going through this, the phone number is 1-800-273-8255. Give that number a call. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't think that it makes you less of a person to ask for help, especially when it comes to stuff like this. Don't think that you're going to be made fun of by whoever it is that you are with or who you're close with. Because at the end of the day, the bravest thing you could possibly do is ask for help. I wish I would have known this earlier in life. I would have probably asked for help way, way sooner. The thing that keeps on pushing me nowadays is to make sure that I leave behind a perfect legacy for my daughter. I'm working my demons away. Don't get me wrong. There are times where depression tries to sneak up on me. But I RKO that bitch like a fucking fat ass piece of shit of a feminist. Nah, I'm kidding. Only joking. Trying to make a little light here because, Jesus, I was going through a bad place in my head. These were episode 4, depression era, times in the mental hospital, and hopefully a lesson to some of you that, you know, sometimes the drug addict, sometimes the crackhead isn't as bad of a person as you may think they are. They're just a lost and broken soul. And all they need is a little push, a little help, and potentially your help. but they need to get stronger, and they can get through this. Not all drug addicts are bad people, and not all bad people are drug addicts. Anyways, this is kind of the end of this video. I'm sorry this kind of got dark. It's kind of got very, very dark very, very quickly. But yeah, this is my channel. This is my story time, and you know what? Next episode of story time, it ain't gonna be dark. I'm gonna just leave this here, and we're gonna bury it now. But yeah, if you guys watched till the end, I hope you guys enjoyed the little story that I gave y'all. And if you like it, if it helps, if it helped in any way, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, but most importantly, hit that share button. Share it to somebody that needs this help, the need to hear this story, because you never know what people are going through, man. You never know what kind of corrupted past that they have. And yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna be signing off now. Love y'all. Hit that sub. And let's make some positivity into this world, shall we? Even if we don't always agree with one another. Even if this world seems so dark and gloomy, there's always something to smile about. Because we have to laugh at the darkest of times in order to smile at our brightest of moments. Anyways, have a good one, guys. Peace.